Joshua Miller's headlights cut through the swirling snow on Christmas Eve, illuminating what at first appeared to be nothing more than shadows against the brick wall of the community center. His 10-year-old son David sat beside him in the passenger seat, breath fogging the window as they pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. "Dad, look." David's voice was barely audible, but it stopped Joshua's hand midway to the ignition. Following his son's gaze across the lot, Joshua's heart skipped a beat. Three figures huddled against the wall, trying to become as small as possible against the bitter Ohio wind. A woman and two small children pressed together like a single organism fighting for survival. Their thin coats offered little protection from the crystalline snowflakes that stung like needles in the freezing December air. Joshua felt something tighten in his chest. Christmas Eve. Temperatures well below freezing. A mother using her body as the only shield between her children and the merciless cold. Without a word, he popped the trunk and grabbed the wool emergency blanket he always kept in his car, along with the bag of canned goods they had brought to donate. "Stay in the car for a minute, buddy," he said, not waiting for David's response. His worn boots crunched against the icy pavement as he approached slowly, carefully, not wanting to startle them. The woman looked up, her blue eyes carrying a weariness that transcended simple exhaustion. Even in the dim glow of the flickering streetlight, Joshua could see the protective instinct that kept her arms wrapped tightly around her children. She couldn't have been more than 32, with straight blonde hair that had clearly once been well kept, but now hung limp around her face. The two little girls pressed against her sides were identical twins, perhaps 7 years old, with matching ginger curls and faces pinched with cold and hunger. "I'm sorry to bother you," Joshua said gently, stopping a few feet away. He held up the blanket. "I'm Joshua. I was just dropping something off at the center and please take these." The woman stared at him with a mixture of wariness and desperate hope. Her lips, chapped from the cold, parted slightly, but no words came out. Joshua turned to wave David over. His son was already out of the car, coat unzipped despite the freezing temperature. David jogged over and without being told, without hesitation, he took off his winter jacket and carefully draped it over the smaller twin's shoulders. "I'm David," he said with a gentleness that made Joshua's throat tighten. "What's your name?" Mia," the little girl stammered through chattering teeth. "And I'm Ava," her sister added quietly, eyes wide and watchful. "I'm Melissa," the woman finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "Thank you for the blanket, but we're fine. The shelter will have space soon." Even as she said it, Joshua could see the lie in her eyes. The shelter would be full on Christmas Eve. Everyone needed somewhere to go tonight. "Come inside," Joshua said. "At least get warm for a while. The community center has hot chocolate." David reached his hand toward Mia with the instinctive kindness of children. "It's really warm inside, and Mr. Frank makes the best hot chocolate." The community center's heating system rattled and hummed, but it worked. That was what mattered. Joshua led them through the dimly lit hallway to the common room where Frank, the elderly night supervisor, was adjusting a space heater in the corner. "Frank, these folks need some warmth and maybe something to eat," Joshua said quietly. "Can you help?" Frank looked at Melissa and the twins, his weathered face softening immediately. He had been working at the community center for 30 years. He'd seen it all. The broken, the desperate, the forgotten. But something about a mother and her children on Christmas Eve hit differently. "Of course," he said, voice gruff but kind. Sit down. I'll be right back." Melissa sank onto the worn couch as if her legs had finally given out. Ava and Mia pressed against her sides, still shivering despite the warmth beginning to seep into their small bodies. Joshua wrapped the blanket around all three of them, tucking it gently around the twins' shoulders. "Thank you," Melissa whispered. She kept repeating it like it was the only phrase she remembered. David sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the twins, pulling a quarter from his pocket. "Want to see a magic trick?" he asked, trying to coax a smile from them. Frank returned with a tray bearing steaming mugs of hot chocolate, thick sandwiches, and a plate of cookies shaped like stars and Christmas trees. Joshua watched as Melissa's hands shook when she reached for the food. She handed sandwiches to Ava and Mia first, waiting until they'd taken their first bites before allowing herself even a sip of hot chocolate. The twins ate slowly at first, as if unsure the food was real. Then hunger took over and they ate with the desperate intensity of children who hadn't had a proper meal in days. Joshua moved to a bench across the room with David, giving them space but staying close enough to help if needed. He studied Melissa as she carefully wiped Mia's face with a napkin, as she whispered encouragement to Ava to drink more hot chocolate, as she made sure her daughters had everything they needed before taking a bite of her own sandwich. A mother doing what mothers do, putting their children first, even when she was clearly starving herself. Joshua felt memories stirring. 7 years ago, he'd been the one taking care of a child alone, learning on the fly, making mistakes, feeling like he was drowning every single day. His mind wandered back to that perfect Sunday afternoon. Catherine had been laughing, chasing 3-year-old David around their backyard, her dark hair gleaming in the sunlight, her smile so bright it seemed impossible that anything could dim it. Then, in an instant, she was on the ground, her face pale, lips turning blue. Joshua had rushed to her side, screaming her name, trying CPR while their neighbor called 911. Undiagnosed heart condition, the doctor said later. A congenital defect hiding in her chest since birth. No warning, no chance to prepare, no opportunity to say goodbye. David's voice pulled him back to the present. Dad, can I show them the magic trick you taught me, the one with the disappearing coin? Go ahead, buddy. As David entertained the twins, Joshua noticed something that made his stomach twist. Melissa was still wearing a wedding ring, worn on, thin, but still there on her left hand. But there was no husband here, no partner helping her keep their children safe and warm. After the twins had eaten and begun to relax, curling together on the couch under the blanket with fuller bellies and warmer bodies, Melissa approached Joshua. Up close, under the fluorescent lights, he could see her more clearly. Despite the dirt smudged on her face and the exhaustion carved into every line, she had kind eyes, eyes that had clearly cried too many tears recently. I don't know how to thank you. You didn't have to do this. Joshua shook his head. Can I ask what happened? You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. Melissa's face crumpled for just a moment before she caught herself, holding the tears back through sheer force of will. She glanced at her daughters, making sure they were far enough away not to hear. My husband, her voice cracked on the word. 6 months ago, he took out a large loan without telling me. Said it was for a business opportunity, something that would change our lives. She laughed, but it was hollow, broken. He was right about that part. Joshua stayed quiet, letting her find the words. Then he left, ran off with a woman he had been seeing behind my back. Left us with nothing but his debt. She twisted the wedding ring on her finger absently. The men who came for the money took everything. Our house, our car, every penny in our savings account. They didn't care that I didn't sign anything, didn't know about any of it. They just wanted their money. Joshua's jaw tightened, his hands curled around the edge of the bench, knuckles going white. He abandoned his children. Melissa nodded, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the room. The shelter we've been staying at is full tonight because of the holiday. We've been waiting outside all evening, hoping a spot would open up, but she trailed off. You have family? Anyone who could help? My parents passed away when I was young. I was raised by my grandmother, but she died 3 years ago. She swallowed hard. My husband's family blamed me when he left, said I must have driven him away, that I wasn't good enough. That's not true, Joshua said, the conviction in his voice surprising even him. You didn't do anything wrong. He did. He's the one who failed, not you. Melissa stared at him, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't know what I did wrong. I tried to be a good wife. I worked, took care of the girls, kept our home. I don't understand what I did to deserve this. Joshua leaned forward, his voice low and steady. You didn't deserve any of it, and your daughters don't deserve to spend Christmas Eve freezing on the street. Across the room, David was showing the twins another magic trick. Mia giggled, a small, fragile sound, and Ava clapped her hands softly. It was the first time Joshua had heard them make any sound of joy. An idea was forming in Joshua's mind. Probably not logical, definitely risky, but something about this moment felt bigger than logic. Listen, he said, making a decision that would change everything. I have a small house. It's not much, but there's a guest room. You and the girls could stay there, just until you get on your feet. Melissa's eyes went wide. I can't. We couldn't impose like that. You don't even know us. I know enough, Joshua glanced at her daughters. I know you're a mother trying to protect her children. I know you need help, and I know it's Christmas Eve, and I can't let you go back out into that cold. He paused, and something in his chest loosened, a knot he hadn't realized he'd been carrying for 7 years. I'm a single dad, too. My wife died 7 years ago. I've been raising David alone since he was 3. It's not easy. There were times when I needed help, when I didn't think I could make it through another day. He met Melissa's eyes. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. Let me do the same for you. Melissa stared at him like he'd just spoken in a language she didn't understand. Why would you do this? We're strangers. Joshua looked at David, who had both twins laughing now with his silly impressions. His son, who had lost his mother but never lost his kindness, who saw people hurting and wanted to help because that's what Joshua had taught him, even when Joshua himself had been drowning in grief. Because it's the right thing to do, Joshua said simply, and because nobody should be alone on Christmas. The drive to Joshua's house was quiet. Melissa and the twins were crammed into the back seat with their meager belongings, 2 small backpacks containing a few changes of clothes and a worn stuffed rabbit that Ava clutched like a lifeline. David sat in the front, occasionally turning around to whisper something to the twins that made them smile shyly. Joshua's mind was racing. What was he thinking? He had a 10-year-old son, a barely there budget, and a house that was already too small for the 2 of them. Now he was bringing home 3 more people. But every time doubt crept in, he remembered Melissa's face in that moment before he had approached. The way she'd pulled her daughters close, trying to shield them with a body that was already frozen and exhausted. The fierce, desperate love of a parent with nothing left to give except themselves. He knew that feeling. When Catherine died, Joshua had felt like his entire world had shattered into pieces too small to ever put back together. The first year after her death was a blur. He remembered crying in the shower so David wouldn't hear. Remembered burning dinner and ordering pizza for the 3rd night in a row. Remembered trying to braid David's hair for picture day using a YouTube tutorial, failing miserably, and finally asking the neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, for help. He'd learned to survive on routine. Structure was the only thing that kept the chaos at bay. Wake up at 6 a.m., make breakfast, pack lunches, get David to the school bus, work his shift as a supervisor at the bottling plant, come home, homework, dinner, bath time, bedtime stories. Even when Joshua's eyes were so heavy, he could barely keep them open. 7 years of this, 7 years of being both mother and father, 7 years of showing up for every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game, every school play. 7 years of being enough even when he felt like he was failing. And somehow, impossibly, they'd made it work. We're home, David's voice broke through Joshua's thoughts as they pulled up to the small rental house. A modest 2-bedroom with chipped paint and a front porch that sagged slightly on one side. It wasn't much, but it was home. Melissa stared at the house like it was a mansion. It's perfect, she whispered. Inside, the house was warm and lived in. Worn furniture, scuffed floors, a Christmas tree in the corner, decorated with handmade ornaments David had crafted in elementary school over the years. Nothing fancy, nothing impressive, but it was safe. The guest room is here, Joshua said, leading them down the narrow hallway. The small room had mostly been used for storage, boxes of Catherine's things he couldn't bear to throw away, old tax documents, David's outgrown clothes. I'll clear out some space tonight. For now, David can sleep on the couch and you and the girls can take his room. No, please, Melissa protested. We can't take his room. But David was already gathering his favorite stuffed animals from his bed. It's okay, I like camping on the couch, and Ava and Mia need my room more than me tonight. Joshua felt his chest tighten with pride. Is that okay, David? He asked, wanting to be sure. David nodded, holding out his stuffed dinosaur to Mia. You can borrow Rex tonight. He's really good at keeping nightmares away. Mia took the dinosaur carefully, hugging it to her chest. Thank you, she whispered. The first words she'd spoken directly to either of them. Later that night, after the twins had fallen asleep in David's bed, their bellies full for the first time in days, their bodies finally warm, Melissa found Joshua in the kitchen. He was making tea because that's what Catherine used to do when she needed to think. It was one of 1,000 small habits he'd kept alive, trying to hold on to pieces of her. I don't know how to thank you, Melissa said softly. Joshua handed her a mug. You don't have to. Just get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps. He hesitated, then added, there's a hiring manager at the bottling plant where I work who owes me a favor. And I know the principal at the elementary school. We can get the girls enrolled. Melissa's hands shook as she held the warm mug. I'll pay you back. Every cent. As soon as I can work, I'll contribute to groceries, rent, everything. I promise. Let's just take it one day at a time, Joshua said gently. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their tea. Joshua studied Melissa in the soft kitchen light, the tired lines around her eyes, the way she held herself like she was expecting another blow to fall at any moment. You really raised David alone? Melissa asked. Joshua nodded. It wasn't easy, still isn't, but you do what you have to do for your kids. Your wife, what happened? Joshua felt a familiar ache in his chest, duller now after 7 years, but never fully gone. Heart condition we didn't know about. She was playing with David in the backyard one afternoon. One moment she was laughing, the next she was gone. No warning, no chance to say goodbye. I'm so sorry, Melissa whispered. We still have David, Joshua said after a moment, and he still has me. That's everything. He looked at her directly. You have your daughters, and from what I've seen tonight, you're an incredible mother. That man was a fool to leave you. Melissa's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she didn't look away. Why are you being so kind to us? Joshua thought about that question, about Catherine's death in the dark year that followed, about Mrs. Henderson bringing casseroles every week, about Frank at the community center letting them use the facilities for free when money was impossibly tight, about all the small kindnesses from strangers that had kept Joshua and David afloat when they were drowning. Because people were kind to me when I needed it most, he said, and because kindness matters, especially on Christmas Eve. Melissa looked at him and something passed between them, a recognition of shared pain, shared struggle, shared strength. They were both wounded, both fighting, both doing everything possible to protect the children who depended on them. Merry Christmas, Joshua, Melissa said softly. Merry Christmas, Melissa. Neither of them knew it yet, but something was beginning. Something neither had been looking for, but both desperately needed. Outside, snow began to fall gently over the small Ohio town, covering the streets in white, making everything clean and new again. Christmas morning arrived with the smell of pancakes and the sound of children's laughter, a sound Joshua's house hadn't held in far too long. David had insisted on sharing his new bicycle with the twins, taking turns riding it up and down the hallway while Joshua made breakfast. Melissa appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking more rested than the night before, though her eyes were still shadowed with worry. I can help, she said immediately, moving to the stove. Please, let me help with something. Joshua stepped aside and they fell into an easy rhythm, him flipping pancakes while she set the table. Their movements synchronized in a way that felt natural, comfortable. Over breakfast, David chattered endlessly about his art set and how he was going to teach Ava and Mia to draw dinosaurs. The twins were quiet but watchful, occasionally venturing small comments. They were still scared, still uncertain, but they were warming up. I need to be honest with you, Melissa said after breakfast when the children were occupied in the living room. I don't have much work experience beyond bookkeeping and managing accounts. Before I got married, I ran the books for a small accounting firm, but that was years ago. After the girls were born, I stayed home. Can you work with numbers? Joshua asked. Yes, I'm actually really good with budgets and financial organization. Oh, Joshua felt something click into place. Then I know exactly where you need to work. The bottling plant needs someone in their accounting department. Our current person is a disaster. Can't keep anything straight. Let me make a call. The days after Christmas blurred together in a strange, unexpected harmony. Joshua called his hiring manager, a gruff man named Bernard, who owed Joshua several favors after Joshua had covered his shifts during a family emergency. Bernard agreed to interview Melissa. She got the job within the week. Melissa started in the accounting department, and within 2 weeks she'd reorganized the entire filing system and caught 3 significant errors that had been costing the company money. Bernard pulled Joshua aside one day at lunch. Where did you find her? She's brilliant. Best hire we've made in years. Joshua felt pride surge through him. Not the kind of pride you feel for yourself, but the deeper kind you feel when someone you care about succeeds. Wait, care about? Joshua pushed the thought away, but it lingered. Melissa insisted on contributing to household expenses as soon as her first paycheck arrived. Joshua tried to refuse, but she was stubborn. You've already given us everything, she said firmly. Please let me do this. Let me feel like I'm not just taking. So they worked out an arrangement. She covered groceries. Joshua handled rent and utilities. They split the rest. The house began to feel different, fuller. The twins' laughter echoed through rooms that had been too quiet for too long. Ava drew pictures that Melissa taped to the refrigerator. Mia sang little songs while coloring at the kitchen table. David thrived having siblings, teaching them games, showing them his favorite books, protecting them like a big brother. Family dinners became routine. Joshua would cook while Melissa helped the kids with homework. They'd sit around the small table talking about their days, making plans for the weekend. It felt natural, right? Joshua caught himself watching Melissa sometimes. The way she laughed at David's terrible jokes. The way she bit her lip when concentrating on a budget spreadsheet. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. One evening, they were washing dishes together after dinner. Joshua washing, Melissa drying. Their hands brushed as she reached for a plate, and Joshua felt electricity shoot up his arm. Melissa felt it too. He could tell by the way she froze, her breath catching. Sorry, Joshua mumbled. It's okay, she said quietly. But the air between them had shifted, charged with something neither was quite ready to name. 2 months passed. Spring was beginning to push away winter's grip. Melissa and the twins had become permanent fixtures in Joshua's life, in his home, in his routine, in his heart. One Saturday afternoon, Melissa was in the guest room organizing old paperwork, trying to rebuild her credit and make sense of the financial disaster her ex-husband had left behind. Joshua was in the kitchen when he heard her sharp intake of breath. Joshua, her voice was strange. Joshua, I need to show you something. He found her sitting on the floor surrounded by old documents, her hands trembling as she held a bank statement. What is it? He asked, kneeling beside her. The loan, she said, her voice shaking. The loan my husband supposedly took out. She showed him the document. Joshua, look at this signature. The signature was clearly forged. The handwriting didn't match any of Melissa's other signatures on legitimate documents. He faked it, she whispered. He committed fraud. I was never legally responsible for any of this debt. Joshua's mind raced. The men who took your house, your savings, they weren't legitimate loan sharks. They were probably his friends helping to cover his tracks, making it look real so he could take the money and run. Melissa's voice was growing stronger, anger replacing shock. I have old text messages, bank statements showing suspicious transfers. I know where he is now. He's living 2 towns over. I saw it on social media before I had to sell my phone. Joshua grabbed her shoulders gently. We're going to fix this. But Melissa, this isn't just about money. This is fraud. I don't want lawyers and courts, Melissa interrupted, her eyes fierce. I want to look him in the face. I want him to know I figured it out. And I want what he stole from my daughters. Joshua saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Strength, raw, powerful, unbreakable strength. Then let's go, he said. But I'm coming with you. You're not doing this alone. The drive took 40 minutes. Melissa had found her ex-husband's address through an old mutual friend who didn't know the whole story. The apartment building was run down, paint peeling, the kind of place people ended up when they were running from something. Joshua parked across the street. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly. Melissa stared at the building, her face set with determination. The document folder clutched tightly against her chest contained every shred of evidence she had managed to salvage. 7 months of betrayal, loss, and homelessness reduced to a few pieces of paper. I'm sure. They climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. Apartment 3C. Melissa knocked, firm and steady. Joshua stood slightly behind her, close enough to provide support, but giving her space to face this moment on her own terms. The man who answered the door looked nothing like Joshua had imagined. Average height, thinning hair, wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. He had once been handsome, perhaps, but now his face carried the bloated softness of someone who drank too much and cared too little. His eyes widened in shock when he saw Melissa. Melissa, what are you? How did you? His gaze flickered nervously to Joshua, then back to his ex-wife. Hello, Trevor. Her voice was cold and controlled. Not the voice of a victim, but of someone who had found her power again. May we come in? Trevor hesitated, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he stepped aside, allowing them into a small apartment littered with empty takeout containers and discarded beer cans. A far cry from the home he had shared with Melissa and the twins. I know everything, Melissa said without preamble. The fake loan, the forged signature, your friends pretending to be collectors, the gambling debts you covered up by destroying your family. Trevor's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I don't know what you're talking about. Melissa pulled out her folder of documents. I have bank statements showing transfers to offshore accounts, text messages you forgot to delete, records of your gambling activity, and witnesses who will testify that you bragged about your plan. It was a bluff. She didn't have witnesses, but Trevor didn't know that. His face crumbled. Melissa, please. I was desperate. The gambling got out of control and You destroyed your children's lives to cover your mistakes, Melissa said, her voice shaking now with barely controlled rage. You made them homeless. You made them cold and hungry and scared on Christmas Eve, Trevor. Your daughters were begging for food on Christmas Eve while you were living in this apartment, safe and warm. Trevor's eyes filled with tears, but they were selfish tears, tears of guilt and shame, not genuine remorse. Joshua stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. You're going to return every penny you stole, Joshua said, his voice low and dangerous. Whatever you have left, you are giving it back today. I don't have it all, Trevor whimpered. I lost most of it gambling. Then you'll give what you have, Melissa said firmly, and you'll sign a legal document admitting to the fraud. Because if you don't, I'm taking everything I have to every person you know, your family, your employer, your friends. I'll make sure everyone understands exactly what kind of man you are. Trevor looked between them, this woman he'd betrayed and this stranger who stood beside her like a shield. He saw that he had no choice. Fine, he whispered. I'll get what I have. They left the apartment 20 minutes later with a bank check for $30,000. Not everything Trevor had stolen, but enough. And they had a signed confession properly witnessed by a neighbor Trevor had called over. In the car, Melissa sat silently, staring at the check in her hands. Then suddenly she started laughing. Not the hollow laugh from before, but real laughter, deep and cathartic and free. I can't believe that worked, she gasped between laughs. Joshua found himself laughing too. You were incredible in there, fierce, powerful. I've never seen anything like it. Melissa's laughter faded and she turned to look at Joshua. Really look at him. I couldn't have done it without you, knowing you were there, that I wasn't alone. Joshua pulled the car over to the side of the road, his heart pounding. Melissa, I need to tell you something. What is it? The truth that stunned me, he said, his voice rough with emotion. It wasn't about the fraud or the money or what your ex-husband did. Then what was it? It was watching you stand there in that apartment, strong and fearless and brilliant. Joshua reached for her hand. It was realizing I've been in love with you for weeks, maybe months. He took a shaky breath. I need you. Not because you need saving, but because you make my life better. You make David's life better. You make our house feel like a home again. Tears streamed down Melissa's face. Joshua, You don't have to answer now, he said quickly. I just needed you to know. I needed you to know that what started as kindness on Christmas Eve became something else, something real. Melissa leaned across the console and kissed him. It was tentative at first, then deeper, filled with all the emotion they'd both been holding back for months. When they pulled apart, both were crying. I love you too, Melissa whispered. I've loved you since that night you made me tea and told me I wasn't failing my daughters. Since you looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth something. You're worth everything, Joshua said fiercely. Sometimes the person you need walks into your life exactly when you need them most. The drive home was different, charged with possibility, with future. Their hands remained intertwined on the console, as if afraid to break the connection now that it had finally been acknowledged. Telling the children about their relationship proved to be more complicated than either of them had anticipated. That evening after dinner, they gathered everyone in the living room. David sat cross-legged on the floor, while Ava and Mia perched on the edge of the couch, their small faces watchful. "We wanted to talk to you all about something important," Joshua began, glancing at Melissa for support. "Melissa and I care about each other very much," he continued. "We've become more than just friends." David's face broke into a wide grin. "Are you getting married?" "Whoa, buddy," Joshua laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "We're not there yet, but we do want to be together as a couple." Ava tilted her head, considering this information with the solemnity only a 7-year-old could muster. "Does this mean we get to stay here forever?" "We'd like that," Melissa said gently. "We'd like all of us to be a family. But how do you feel about it?" "I think it's awesome," David declared. "I always wanted siblings." Ava nodded in agreement, but Mia remained silent, her small face tight with worry. Later, when the other children were getting ready for bed, Joshua found her sitting alone on the back porch steps, her arms wrapped around herself despite the spring evening's warmth. "May I join you?" he asked. Mia nodded without looking up. Joshua sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. "You seemed worried earlier," he said softly. "Want to talk about it?" Mia was quiet for so long that Joshua thought she might not answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she asked, "Are you going to leave too, like Daddy did?" The question hit Joshua like a physical blow. He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "No, Mia, I'm not going to leave. Your father made a terrible choice, but that was about him, not about you. Not all dads leave." "How do I know?" she asked, finally looking up at him with eyes too old for her young face. "Because I promised David I would never leave him, and I've kept that promise for 7 years. Because promises matter to me. Because family matters to me." He held out his hand, palm up. "An offer, not a demand. I can't prove it with words, only with time. But I'll be here tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that." Slowly, hesitantly, Mia placed her small hand in his. They sat together in silence, watching fireflies begin to appear in the darkening yard. "Joshua?" she asked finally. "Yes?" "Can I call you Dad someday? Not now, but someday?" Joshua felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I would be honored, whenever you're ready." The following weeks brought new routines and adjustments. With the money recovered from Trevor, Melissa paid off the most pressing debts and opened savings accounts for the twins. She flourished at work, quickly becoming indispensable to the accounting department. At home, she and Joshua navigated the delicate balance of merging their lives while respecting each other's independence. Not everything was smooth sailing. David, despite his initial enthusiasm, sometimes struggled with sharing his father's attention. One rainy Saturday morning, Joshua found him sitting alone in his bedroom, surrounded by photo albums. "What are you looking at, buddy?" Joshua asked, sitting beside him on the bed. "Pictures of Mom," David said, his finger tracing Catherine's smile in a beach photo. "Do you think she would be mad that you love Melissa now?" Joshua felt his heart constrict. "No, David, I don't think she would be mad at all. Your mom wanted us to be happy more than anything in the world. But what if you forget about her?" "That will never happen," Joshua said firmly. "Your mother is part of who we are. Nothing and no one can ever change that. Loving Melissa doesn't mean I love your mom any less. The heart doesn't work that way. It grows." David considered this, then nodded slowly. "Like how I can love Ava and Mia like sisters, but still have space to love other people too." "Exactly like that," Joshua said, amazed once again by his son's emotional intelligence. "Dad?" David said after a moment, "And yes? I think Mom would really like Melissa. She makes you smile again." Joshua pulled his son into a tight hug, fighting back tears. "I think so too, buddy. I think so too." The twins faced their own adjustment challenges. Having lived in fear and uncertainty for months, they struggled to believe their new situation was permanent. Ava would hoard food under her bed, a habit born from nights of going hungry. Mia had nightmares that would wake the entire household, her screams of terror cutting through the darkness. On one such night, Joshua found Melissa sitting on the floor beside Mia's bed, singing softly in Spanish, a lullaby from her own childhood. He stood in the doorway, watching as she gently stroked Mia's hair until the little girl's breathing evened out in sleep. "You're amazing with them," he whispered when Melissa joined him in the hallway. "They're amazing children," she replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "They've been through so much, yet they're still so loving, so resilient. Like their mother," Joshua said, kissing the top of her head. As spring turned to summer, their relationship deepened. They went on proper dates, dinner at a small Italian restaurant while Mrs. Henderson watched the children, a concert in the park where they danced under the stars, long walks by the river where they shared stories of their past and dreams of their future. Joshua learned that Melissa had wanted to be an artist before practical considerations led her to accounting. Melissa discovered Joshua's secret passion for woodworking, a hobby he'd abandoned after Catherine's death. They began to uncover the layers of each other, beyond parent and provider, beyond survivor and refugee. One evening in early July, they sat on the back porch swing after the children were asleep, a glass of wine shared between them. Fireflies danced in the yard, and the scent of jasmine hung heavy in the air. Joshua took Melissa's hand, running his thumb over her knuckles. "I've been thinking," he said. "Always dangerous," she teased, but her eyes were soft in the porch light. "The lease on this house is up next month. I was thinking maybe we could look for something bigger. A place with enough bedrooms for everyone. A place that could be ours, not just mine that you moved into." Melissa went still beside him. "Are you asking me to move in with you officially? To combine our lives completely?" "Yes," Joshua said simply. "I want to build something permanent with you, Melissa. I want us to be a real family." She didn't answer immediately, and Joshua felt a flicker of uncertainty. "What's wrong?" and he asked. Melissa took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something I've been afraid to say." She turned to face him fully. "Joshua, I need some independence. These months with you have been wonderful, but I went from depending on Trevor to depending on you. I need to know I can stand on my own." Joshua felt a chill that had nothing to do with the summer night. "Are you saying you want to leave?" "No," she said quickly, squeezing his hand. "Never. I'm saying I want us to be partners, equals. I don't want to be rescued anymore. I want to be strong beside you, not sheltered behind you." "You already are strong," Joshua said. "Stronger than anyone I know." "Then trust me to make my own choices," she said. "Trust that I choose you not because I need a roof over my head, but because I love you, because I want to build a life with you." Understanding dawned slowly. "What are you suggesting?" "With the promotion Bernard offered me, I can afford a small place of my own. Nothing fancy, but something that's mine. We can still be together, still work toward a future, but I need to prove to myself that I can do this." Joshua was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. His first instinct was hurt, a sense of rejection. But as he looked at Melissa, really looked at her, he saw the woman who had stood up to Trevor, who had rebuilt her life from nothing, who had protected her daughters through impossible circumstances. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay?" she repeated, surprised. "I love you, Melissa. Not some idea of you as someone I rescued, but you, fierce, independent, brilliant you. If having your own place is what you need, then that's what we'll do." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "You understand?" "I'm trying to," he said honestly. "It might take me some time to fully get there, but I want you to be happy. I want you to be you, not someone you think I want you to be." "Thank you," she whispered, leaning in to kiss him softly. "This doesn't change how I feel about you. If anything, it makes me love you more." The following month, Melissa found a small two-bedroom apartment just 3 blocks from Joshua's house. The children were confused at first, especially David, who worried this meant they were breaking up. Joshua and Melissa sat all 3 kids down to explain. "We're still together," Joshua assured them. "We still love each other. But Melissa needs a space that's her own, and that's okay. Think of it as having 2 homes instead of one," Melissa added. "You'll have your rooms here and at my place. More space, more toys." This explanation seemed to satisfy David and Ava, but Mia remained skeptical. "But families live together," she insisted. Joshua knelt in front of her. "Families come in all shapes and sizes, Mia. What makes a family isn't living under the same roof. It's loving each other, taking care of each other, being there for each other no matter what. Promise? Mia asked, her small face serious. Promise, Joshua and Melissa said in unison. They developed a new routine. Weeknights, the children stayed at Joshua's house for school. Weekends, they often stayed at Melissa's apartment. Family dinners happened almost every night, alternating between the two homes. Joshua had a key to Melissa's place. She had a key to his. They were apart but together, finding their way towards something that worked for all of them. Bernard's promotion had made Melissa the head of accounting at the bottling plant. She thrived in her new position, implementing systems that saved the company thousands. Joshua continued his work as a floor supervisor, respected by the men and women who worked under him for his fair treatment and strong work ethic. The summer passed in a blur of pool days, barbecues, and firefly catching. The children grew brown and happy under the Ohio sun. David taught the twins to ride bikes without training wheels. Ava discovered a talent for drawing that Melissa encouraged with art classes at the community center. Mia, the quietest of the three, blossomed under Joshua's patient attention, following him around as he did household repairs, handing him tools and asking endless questions. As autumn approached and school preparations began, Joshua found himself thinking more and more about the future. One Sunday afternoon, while Melissa was taking the kids for ice cream, he drove to the small jewelry store downtown. The elderly jeweler greeted him with a knowing smile. "Something special for a special lady?" she asked. "Very special," Joshua confirmed. He described what he wanted, something elegant but understated, something that would suit Melissa's practical nature while honoring her artistic soul. 2 hours later, he left with a small velvet box in his pocket and a plan forming in his mind. The following weekend marked exactly 9 months since that fateful Christmas Eve. Joshua arranged for Mrs. Henderson to watch the children, telling Melissa only that he had a surprise for her. He drove them to the community center where they had first met, now quiet and empty on a Saturday evening. "What are we doing here?" Melissa asked as they walked up the familiar steps. "You'll see," Joshua said with a smile. Inside, Frank was waiting for them. The old night supervisor had transformed the common room. Twinkling lights hung from the ceiling, candles flickered on tables covered with white cloths, and in the center of the room stood a small table set for two. "Frank," Melissa gasped, "did you do all this?" "Had some help," the old man admitted gruffly. David picked out the lights, the twins made the centerpiece. He gestured to a slightly lopsided arrangement of wildflowers in a painted jar. "I'll leave you two alone. There's dinner keeping warm in the kitchen." After he shuffled out, Melissa turned to Joshua, eyes wide. "What is all this?" Joshua took her hands in his. 9 months ago, I pulled into this parking lot and saw 3 shadows against the wall. I had no idea that moment would change my life forever." He led her to the table and they sat down. Joshua served the meal he had prepared earlier. Nothing fancy, just the simple pasta dish that had become their favorite over the months together. As they ate, they reminisced about that first night, about how far they had come. Melissa talked about her plans to use her accounting skills to help other women in financial distress. Joshua shared his ideas for expanding the community center's programs for single parents. When they had finished eating, Joshua reached across the table for Melissa's hand. "These past months have shown me something I never thought I'd find again after Catherine died. A second chance at love, at family, at life." He stood and moved around the table, dropping to one knee beside her chair. Melissa's hand flew to her mouth as he pulled the velvet box from his pocket. "I know we've done things a little backward," he said with a smile, "but I want to do this right. Melissa, you are the strongest, most beautiful soul I've ever known. You've taught me that love isn't about rescuing or being rescued. It's about walking together through whatever life brings." He opened the box, revealing a ring with a single pearl surrounded by small diamonds. "This pearl reminds me of you, something beautiful created through difficulty and pressure. Will you marry me, Melissa? Will you build a life with me, whatever shape that takes?" Tears spilled down Melissa's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Joshua, I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and as he stood to pull her into his arms, the door burst open. David, Ava, and Mia tumbled in, unable to contain their excitement any longer. "Did she say yes?" David demanded. "She said yes," Joshua confirmed, laughing as the children swarmed them with hugs and cheers. Frank appeared in the doorway, trying to look stern, but failing miserably as a smile cracked through his weathered face. Couldn't keep them away any longer. Said they had to be part of the big moment. Melissa knelt down, gathering all three children into her arms. Of course you had to be here. This isn't just about Joshua and me. This is about all of us becoming a family. Are we going to live together now? Ava asked. Joshua and Melissa exchanged glances. We're going to figure it out together, Joshua said. Whatever works best for all of us. As the children chattered excitedly about the wedding, Joshua pulled Melissa close, whispering in her ear, "Are you happy?" She looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears and joy. Happier than I ever thought possible. You didn't just give me shelter that night, Joshua. You gave me back my belief that good things are possible, that good people exist, that love can be real and kind and patient. You gave me the same, he murmured, pressing his forehead to hers. You brought light back into our lives. Outside, the first snow of autumn began to fall, delicate flakes swirling in the night air. Inside, surrounded by the children they loved and the future they would build, Joshua and Melissa sealed their promise with a kiss, not the first, nowhere near the last, but perhaps the most meaningful. A kiss that spoke of journeys ended and begun, of wounds healed and bridges built, of families formed not by blood but by choice. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as moments of deepest despair. Sometimes the coldest night leads to the warmest dawn. And sometimes on a frozen Christmas Eve, when you open your heart to help a stranger, you find exactly what you've been missing all along. 2 years had passed since that fateful Christmas Eve when three huddled figures caught in Joshua's headlights had changed the course of his life forever. The community center, once merely a place where he and David occasionally dropped off donations, had become the centerpiece of their shared history. The place where hope had been rekindled on a frozen night, where a proposal had sealed a promise of forever, and now where two families would officially become one. The space had been transformed. White flowers cascaded from the ceiling, their delicate blooms catching light from hundreds of twinkling bulbs. Wooden chairs, borrowed from the local church, formed neat rows across the worn linoleum floor. At the front, Frank stood waiting, his weathered face solemn beneath silver hair combed neatly for the occasion. Despite never having officiated a wedding before, he had obtained the necessary certification online the moment Joshua had asked him to perform the ceremony. No one else should do it, Joshua had insisted. This story began with you. Joshua adjusted his tie nervously, smoothing down the lapels of the suit David had helped him select. His son stood beside him, chest puffed out with importance in his role as best man. At 13 now, David had shot up several inches, his face losing its childhood roundness, though his eyes still carried the same kindness they always had. You look good, Dad, David whispered, reaching up to straighten his father's boutonniere. Mom would think so too. Joshua swallowed hard against the sudden tightness in his throat. They still spoke of Catherine often, keeping her memory alive in their home and hearts. Her parents, right there, Eleanor and Richard, sat in the front row now, their initial reservations about Joshua remarrying having evolved into genuine support. The journey to their acceptance hadn't been easy. When Joshua first told them about his relationship with Melissa 6 months after they met, Eleanor had cried, feeling as if her daughter was being replaced. Richard had been stoic but distant. It was David who had ultimately bridged the gap, bringing his grandparents to dinner one evening without warning anyone. They need to meet her, he'd said simply when Joshua questioned him afterward. They need to see why you love her. That evening had been awkward at first, but by dessert, Eleanor was sharing recipes with Melissa while Richard asked thoughtful questions about the twins. Watching Melissa with the children, the way she gently encouraged Mia to speak up, the way she listened intently to David's school stories, had shown Catherine's parents the kind of woman their son-in-law had fallen in love with. Over time, their weekly phone calls had evolved to include questions about Melissa and the girls. Last Christmas, they'd sent gifts for everyone, and now they sat in the front row, Eleanor dabbing at her eyes, Richard's hand steady on her shoulder. Thanks, buddy, Joshua managed, squeezing his son's shoulder. Music began to play, not the traditional wedding march, but a gentle Spanish guitar melody that Melissa had chosen. The small gathering of friends and colleagues from the bottling plant turned in their seats as the back doors opened. Ava and Mia entered first, no longer the frightened, hungry children of 2 years ago. At 9 years old, they moved with confidence, their matching dresses swirling around their knees as they scattered rose petals along the aisle. Their ginger curls had been carefully braided with ribbons that matched the deep blue of their dresses. They caught Joshua's eye and beamed, the gap in Ava's smile from a recently lost tooth only adding to her charm. Then Melissa appeared, and Joshua's world narrowed to just her. She wore a simple white dress that flowed around her like water, her blonde hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. No veil obscured her face. She had wanted nothing between them on this day, she'd said. A small bouquet of wildflowers, gathered by the children that morning, trembled slightly in her hands. But it was her eyes that captured him, shining with unshed tears and so much love that Joshua felt his knees weaken. As Melissa reached him, she handed her bouquet to Mia and took his outstretched hands. Her fingers were cool against his palms, but her smile was warm enough to melt the deepest winter. "We are gathered here today," Frank began, his gruff voice softened with emotion, "to celebrate the joining of two families who found each other when they needed it most, to celebrate the love that grew from kindness, to celebrate second chances and new beginnings." As Frank spoke about resilience and hope, Joshua caught glimpses of their journey in the faces around him. Bernard from the plant, nodding approvingly. Mrs. Henderson, who had watched the children countless times during their dates. The principal from the elementary school who had fast-tracked the twins' enrollment. So many people who had played small but vital roles in their story. "I do," he said when prompted, his voice strong and certain. "I do," Melissa echoed, tears streaming freely down her face now. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Joshua pulled Melissa close and kissed her as David, Ava, and Mia cheered. Frank wiped his eyes with a handkerchief, trying to maintain his gruff demeanor even as emotion overwhelmed him. Later, at their reception held in the same community center, Joshua stood to give a toast. David handed him a glass of champagne, and Joshua looked around at all the faces he loved. "2 years ago," he began, "I thought I was just helping a stranger on Christmas Eve. I thought I was just doing the right thing, offering warmth and food and shelter to a mother and her children who needed it." He looked at Melissa, who was watching him with such love it made his chest ache. "What I discovered instead was something profound and unexpected. When I saw Melissa protecting her daughters that night, I recognized something in her. I recognized myself. I recognized strength and love and determination that mirrored my own journey." He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion. "In reaching out to help her, she ended up helping me. She brought joy back into our home. She gave David siblings he adores. She reminded me that love can find you again, even when you've stopped looking." Joshua raised his glass. "To second chances, to finding home in the most unexpected places, to a future built together. To family," Melissa added softly. "To family," everyone echoed. The evening passed in a blur of dancing, laughter, and celebration. Eleanor surprised everyone by embracing Melissa tightly, whispering something that made both women tear up. Richard taught the twins a simple waltz, his formal demeanor melting when Ava stepped on his toes and giggled. David moved between guest groups like a seasoned host, making sure everyone had enough cake. As the party continued around them, Joshua pulled Melissa close, swaying gently to the music. "Thank you," Melissa whispered against his chest. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible, for giving us a home when we had nowhere to go, for loving my daughters as your own." Joshua tilted her chin up so he could see her face. "Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger, for letting me into your life, for making our family complete." They kissed softly as snow began to fall outside, just like it had that first Christmas Eve. "Where shall we live now that we're officially married?" Melissa asked later as they slow danced beneath the twinkling lights. "Your house or my apartment?" Joshua had been thinking about this question for months. "Neither," he said, pulling back slightly to gauge her reaction. "I have something to show you tomorrow." Melissa raised an eyebrow. "Another surprise? You're getting quite good at those." "I hope you'll like this one," he said with a smile that couldn't quite hide his nervousness. The following day, after seeing their wedding guests off, Joshua drove the family through town and down a winding country road on the outskirts. The children chattered excitedly in the back seat, having been sworn to secrecy about their involvement in what was about to happen. "Where are we going?" Melissa asked as houses gave way to fields dusted with early spring green. "Almost there," Joshua promised. He turned down a long gravel driveway bordered by ancient oak trees. At the end stood a two-story farmhouse, its white paint fresh, its blue shutters bright against the pale spring sky. A wide porch wrapped around the front, in flower beds, still dormant from winter, lined the walkway. "Joshua," Melissa breathed, "what is this?" He parked the car and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "It's ours. If you want it to be." "Ours?" she repeated, her eyes wide. "I've been saving for years," he explained. "After Catherine died, I put away money whenever I could, thinking someday David might want to go to college, or we might need it for an emergency. When your promotion came through and we started talking seriously about getting married, I spoke to a realtor." "Can we show her now, Dad?" David called from the boss's seat, practically bouncing with excitement. Joshua laughed. "Yes, go ahead." The children tumbled out of the car and raced up the walkway. Melissa followed more slowly, her hand clutched tightly in Joshua's. "It needs some work," he admitted as they approached the house. "The kitchen is outdated and the bathrooms could use remodeling, but the bones are good and there's plenty of space." The front door opened as they reached the porch, and Ava and Mia stood there grinning, having used the key hidden under the mat that Joshua had shown them earlier in the week. "Welcome home," they chorused. Inside, sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating hardwood floors that showed signs of wear, but remained solid and beautiful. A fireplace dominated the living room, its stone mantel waiting for family photos. The dining room could easily fit a table for 8 or more. Upstairs, 4 bedrooms offered space for everyone, including a master suite with windows overlooking the backyard where an old maple spread massive branches. "This is why you've been working so many extra shifts," Melissa said softly as they stood in what would be their bedroom. "This is why you've been coming home so tired." Joshua nodded. "I wanted to surprise you, but I need you to know something important." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "This isn't me making a decision for us. This is me showing you a possibility. If you don't love it, we'll find something else. Together, if you'd rather stay in town, closer to work, we can do that. This is your home too, which means you get an equal say." Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "You remembered. About needing my independence. About being partners." "Of course I remembered. It's important to you, so it's important to me." She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face against his shoulder. "I love it. I love that you found it. I love that you included the children in the surprise. I love that you're giving me a choice, even though you've clearly put so much thought into this." Joshua held her close, relief washing over him. "So, is that a yes?" Melissa pulled back, laughing through her tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." "Dad, Mom!" David's voice echoed up the stairs. "Come see the backyard. There's a treehouse." They shared a smile at David's use of Mom for Melissa, something that had begun naturally about 6 months ago and had brought them all to tears the first time. It had happened during a simple family dinner. David had passed the salt and said, "Thanks, Mom," then frozen, his face flushing red. The table had gone silent. Melissa had stared at him, a forkful of pasta suspended midway to her mouth. Then she'd set down her fork carefully and reached for his hand. "Is that okay?" David had asked in a small voice. "I mean, I still remember my real mom. I always will. But you're my mom now, too, in a different way." "It's more than okay," Melissa had whispered. "It's an honor." The memory still brought a lump to Joshua's throat whenever he thought of it. "We should go see this tree house," Melissa said now, taking Joshua's hand. "We should," he agreed. "But first," he pulled her close and kissed her deeply, both of them marveling at how far they had come from that frozen Christmas Eve night. From strangers to family. From broken to whole. The move into their new home happened gradually over the next month. Melissa's apartment lease ended first, so her furniture and the girls' belongings came in the initial wave. Joshua's house took longer to pack up. 7 years in one place had accumulated more memories and possessions than he'd realized. Some things were easy to decide. Catherine's piano, which had sat mostly unused in Joshua's living room, found a place of honor in their new family room, where Ava had already begun taking lessons. The patchwork quilt that Melissa's grandmother had made became a fixture on the couch, perfect for movie nights and sick days. Other decisions proved more challenging. The children debated endlessly about bedroom arrangements. Should the girls share or each have their own room? In the end, they decided that Ava and Mia would have separate rooms for the first time in their lives, but a connecting door between would remain unlocked so they could visit each other whenever they wanted. David chose the smallest bedroom, tucked under the eaves with a window seat perfect for reading, but closest to the backyard treehouse he'd claimed as his domain. It needs a ladder, he declared on their first weekend in the house. A proper one, not just those boards nailed to the trunk. We could make one together, Joshua suggested. I have some wood in the garage. And so began their first project in the new house, a sturdy ladder for the treehouse. David had helped measure and cut, while Ava painted each rung a different color. Mia, still the quietest of the three, had worked alongside Joshua, holding nails and handing him tools with a seriousness that made him smile. "You're good at this," he'd told her as she carefully sanded the edges of each rung. "I like making things," she'd said softly, "things that stay." Joshua had understood immediately. After months of instability, the idea of creating something permanent had special meaning for her. "Would you like to learn more woodworking?" he'd asked. "I used to do a lot before." "Before your wife died?" David told us. "Yes, before that, but I've been thinking about starting again." Mia had looked up at him, her eyes solemn. "I'd like that, to make things with you." It had become their special time together. Joshua teaching Mia simple woodworking skills while David was at soccer practice and Ava at her art class. She had a natural patience with the work, carefully following instructions, never rushing. The first time she completed a small jewelry box entirely on her own, the pride on her face had been something Joshua would never forget. It was Mia who had finally called him Dad for the first time, 3 months after the wedding. They'd been in the garage working on a birdhouse. She'd measured a board incorrectly and, frustrated, had said, "Dad, can you help me fix this?" So naturally that neither of them had noticed until she was halfway through her next sentence. She'd stopped suddenly, realizing what she'd said. Joshua had pretended not to notice, showing her how to recut the board. But later, as they were cleaning up, she'd whispered, "Is it okay that I called you Dad?" "More than okay," he'd told her, kneeling down to her level. "It's the best thing I've heard all day." She'd launched herself into his arms then, hugging him tightly. "I decided last week," she'd said into his shoulder. "I just wasn't brave enough to say it." "You're the bravest person I know, Mia," he'd told her. "Don't ever forget that." Joshua and Melissa's life settled into new patterns. They carpooled to the bottling plant most days, returning home to cook dinner together while the children did homework at the kitchen island. Weekends were filled with house projects, repainting rooms, replanting flower beds, building shelves for Melissa's growing collection of art supplies. Summer came, bringing with it the 1-year anniversary of their engagement. Joshua woke early that morning, slipping out of bed without waking Melissa. He made his way downstairs and out into the garden, where he'd been secretly nurturing rose bushes all spring. Cutting the most perfect blooms, he arranged them in Catherine's crystal vase, a wedding gift from her parents that symbolized their blessing of this new marriage. When he returned to their bedroom, Melissa was just stirring, her hair splayed across the pillow in golden waves. She smiled sleepily as he placed the vase on her nightstand. "Happy anniversary," he whispered, sitting beside her on the edge of the bed. "You remembered," she murmured, reaching up to touch his face. "I remember everything important," he assured her, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "The first time I saw you, the first time you laughed in our kitchen, the first time you kissed me in the car after confronting Trevor." Melissa sat up, pulling him closer. "I remember too, the blanket you gave us, the tea you made me that first night, the way you looked at me like I mattered when I felt invisible." "You always mattered," Joshua said fiercely, "from the very first moment." Their kiss deepened, hands tangling in hair, bodies pressing closer. 7 months of marriage had done nothing to diminish the spark between them. If anything, the security of their commitment had only heightened their connection. A knock at the door interrupted them. "Dad? Mom?" David called. "Ava and Mia want to make pancakes for your anniversary, but they can't reach the mixing bowl." Joshua rested his forehead against Melissa's. both of them laughing softly. The joys of family life, he murmured. I wouldn't change it for anything, she replied, giving him one more quick kiss before calling out, We'll be right there. One crisp autumn day, as their second wedding anniversary approached, Joshua came home to find Melissa sitting at the kitchen table, an odd expression on her face. Everything okay? He asked, setting down his lunch cooler and moving to kiss her hello. She caught his hand, her fingers trembling slightly. I have something to tell you. Concern flooded him. What is it? Are the girls okay? David? They're fine, she assured him quickly. Everyone's fine. It's just... She took a deep breath. I've been offered a job. Relief washed over him. That's great. Where? At Thompson Financial. They want me to head their entire accounting department. Joshua whistled low. Thompson Financial was the largest employer in the county, a step up from the bottling plant in terms of prestige and, he assumed, salary. That's incredible, Melissa. You deserve it. When do they want you to start? She blinked, clearly surprised by his immediate support. You're not upset? It would mean leaving the bottling plant. We wouldn't be working together anymore. Joshua sat beside her, taking both her hands in his. Why would I be upset about my brilliant wife being recognized for her talents? I'm proud of you. So incredibly proud. Tears filled her eyes. I was worried you might think I was being selfish, changing our routine, disrupting what works. Listen to me, Joshua said earnestly. You have spent most of your life putting others first. Your ex-husband, your daughters, even me. Taking this job isn't selfish. It's you continuing to grow into the amazing woman you are. The woman I fall more in love with every day. Melissa launched herself into his arms, nearly knocking him off his chair. I love you so much, she whispered against his neck. So much. I love you too, he murmured, holding her tight. Now tell me everything about this job. As Melissa excitedly shared the details of her new position, Joshua marveled at how far they had come. The frightened woman he'd met that Christmas Eve night was now a confident professional, sought after for her skills, secure in her worth. And he had changed too, growing from a man merely surviving after tragedy to one fully embracing life and love again. That evening, when all three children were home from their various activities, Joshua and Melissa gathered them in the living room to share the news about her new job. The response was enthusiastically positive, especially when Melissa mentioned the company's annual family picnic, which was legendary for its games and food. There's something else we should talk about, Joshua said once the initial excitement had settled. He glanced at Melissa, who nodded encouragingly. With Mom's new job, we're going to need to adjust our schedules a bit. I was thinking that maybe it's time I cut back my hours at the plant. The children looked confused. Why, Dad? David asked. Well, for one thing, Bernard has been after me to move into management for years, which would mean more regular hours. And for another, he took a deep breath. I've been thinking about doing more with my woodworking. This had been a private dream, something he had only recently begun discussing with Melissa. The workshop he'd set up in the garage had become his sanctuary, a place where he created small pieces, jewelry boxes, picture frames, occasionally a table or chair. What had started as a hobby had slowly grown into something more, with friends and then friends of friends commissioning pieces. Like making furniture for real? Not just for us? Ava asked. Joshua nodded. Maybe. If Mom's new salary can cover most of our expenses, I might be able to reduce my hours at the plant and spend more time building things. Eventually, maybe even open a small shop. That would be so cool, David said, his eyes lighting up. Your stuff is way better than the store-bought junk. Can I still help? Mia asked quietly, even if it's a real business? Especially if it's a real business, Joshua assured her. You're my best apprentice. Mom, Melissa squeezed his hand. Your father is very talented, and I think it's time the world got to see that. So you're going to be like Mom, Mia said thoughtfully, following your dreams, too. Joshua felt his throat tighten at her perceptiveness. That's right, sweetheart. We're both going to follow our dreams, and hopefully show all of you that it's never too late to try something new. The following spring, as Joshua's 43rd birthday approached, Melissa and the children began acting suspiciously. Hushed conversations that ended when he entered rooms, mysterious phone calls, Secretive smiles exchanged across the dinner table. He played along, pretending not to notice, curious to see what they were planning. On the morning of his birthday, instead of the usual breakfast in bed that had become their tradition for family celebrations, Joshua was handed a blindfold. "Put this on," David instructed, barely containing his excitement. "Should I be worried?" Joshua asked with a laugh, but complied, tying the soft fabric over his eyes. Hands guided him downstairs and out the front door. He could feel the April sunshine on his face, hear birds singing in the trees that lined their property. "Just a few more steps." Melissa's voice came from beside him, her hand warm in his. "Ready? 1, 2, 3. The blindfold was removed, and Joshua blinked in the sudden brightness. Before him stood a small building he had never seen before, a wooden structure with large windows and a covered porch, nestled among the trees at the edge of their property. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your workshop," Melissa said, her eyes shining with pride. "Your real workshop, not just the garage." "We helped build it," Ava announced, bouncing on her toes. "I hammered nails," Mia added, showing a small bandage on her thumb. "Only hit myself once." "And I designed the layout," David said. "Mom hired Mr. Jenkins to do the actual construction, but we all helped." Joshua stood speechless, staring at the building that represented a dream he'd barely allowed himself to acknowledge. "Want to see inside?" Melissa asked gently. He could only nod, too overcome with emotion to speak. They led him up the steps and through the door into a space that took his breath away. Windows on 3 sides filled the room with natural light. A workbench ran along one wall, complete with a new lathe and set of chisels. Shelves held wood of various types, some of which he recognized as rare and expensive. A small wood-burning stove sat in one corner for winter warmth. But what finally broke his composure was the sign hanging above the door, wooden letters carved and stained by 3 different hands. Miller Family Woodworks. "Do you like it?" Melissa asked softly. Joshua turned to his family, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "I love it. I love all of you. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Dad," David said, moving to hug him. "You've given us everything. It's our turn to give something back." The twins joined the embrace, their arms wrapping around his waist. Melissa completed the circle, her hand finding his over the children's heads. "This is your space," she told him, "to create, to teach the kids, to grow your business if that's what you want. No pressure, no expectations, just possibility." "How did you manage this?" Joshua asked when he could finally speak again. "This must have cost—" "Don't worry about that," Melissa interrupted. "Let's just say my new job pays very well, and this is what I wanted to do with it. Invest in you, in your talent, the way you invested in me when I had nothing." In that moment, surrounded by the family he had never expected to have, standing in a workshop he had never dared dream of owning, Joshua understood with perfect clarity what people meant when they spoke of coming full circle. From the darkness of Catherine's death, through years of lonely single parenthood, to that fateful Christmas Eve when he'd spotted 3 huddled figures in the cold, to this moment of complete fulfillment, the journey had not been a straight line, but a circle, bringing him back to himself, only better, stronger, more complete. "I think," he said slowly, "it's time I made something special for our community center, something to mark where all this began." The project took him 3 months of evenings and weekends. He worked with a quiet intensity, sometimes allowing Mia to help with the simpler aspects, but keeping the overall design a surprise from everyone. The wood he chose was cherry, difficult to work with but beautiful when finished, with a depth and warmth that reminded him of the journey their family had taken. When it was finally complete, he loaded it carefully into the back of their SUV one Saturday morning in July. "Now, can we know what it is?" David asked, climbing into the back seat. "You'll see when we get there," Joshua promised. Everyone buckled up. The drive to the community center was filled with speculative chatter from the back seat. Melissa rode shotgun, her hand resting on Joshua's thigh, a silent gesture of support and love. Frank was waiting for them at the entrance, having been included in the surprise. At 75 now, he moved more slowly, but his mind remained sharp, his dedication to the center unwavering. He had refused to retire, instead training younger staff to take over the more physical aspects of his job while he focused on program development. "About time you got here," he grumbled, but his eyes twinkled with anticipation. "Need help unloading whatever you've got back there?" "I've got it," Joshua assured him. "Just need to know where you want it placed." "Front lobby," Frank said decisively, "where everyone can see it when they come in." And with David's help, Joshua carefully removed the large object from the car, keeping it covered with a drop cloth. They carried it inside and positioned it against the wall of the entrance hall, where sunlight from the high windows would illuminate it throughout the day. Once it was in place, Joshua stepped back, suddenly nervous. What if they didn't like it? What if the hours of work, the meaning he'd tried to infuse into every curve and joint, didn't translate? "Can we see it now, Dad?" Mia asked, tugging at his sleeve. Joshua took a deep breath and nodded. "Melissa, would you do the honors?" His wife stepped forward and gently pulled away the cloth, revealing a wooden bench. But not just any bench. This one told a story. The back was carved with a winter scene, a car's headlights illuminating three figures huddled against a brick wall, snow swirling around them. The armrests were formed from intertwining branches that represented two families growing together. The seat itself was wide enough for 5 people, with subtle curves that invited them to sit close to one another. And carved into the front edge, in flowing script, were the words, "Sometimes the greatest miracles come from the simplest choices." There was absolute silence as everyone took in the details, the craftsmanship, the story told in wood. Then Frank cleared his throat, obviously fighting emotion. This is something special, Joshua. Really special." Melissa's eyes were filled with tears as she ran her fingers over the carving of herself and the twins from that first night. "I can't believe you remembered every detail." "I remember everything about that night," Joshua said softly. "How could I forget the moment my life changed forever?" David studied the bench with the critical eye of someone beginning to learn the craft himself. "This is your best work yet, Dad, by far." The twins simply climbed onto the bench, their small hands tracing the carvings, their faces solemn with the understanding of what this represented. "We were so cold," Ava whispered. "And now we're not," Mia added, looking up at Joshua and Melissa with complete trust in her eyes. A young family chose that moment to enter the community center. A mother, father, and toddler seeking information about preschool programs. They paused, admiring the new addition to the lobby. "That's beautiful," the mother commented. "Did someone local make it?" "I did," Joshua said, extending his hand. "Joshua Miller." "He's not just local," Frank interjected with pride. "He's family. This place wouldn't be the same without the Millers." As Frank led the young family toward his office, chattering about the center's programs, Joshua wrapped his arm around Melissa's waist. She leaned into him, fitting perfectly against his side as she always had. "Happy?" he asked quietly. "Beyond words," she replied. "You've given us so much, Joshua. A home, security, love. You've given me just as much," he assured her arm. "Maybe more." As they watched their children explore the community center, David showing the twins the art room where summer classes were held, Joshua reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that first night when he'd spotted 3 shadows in his headlights, to the day Melissa had stood up to her ex-husband, to their wedding in this very building, to this moment of giving back to the place where it all began, the circle was complete. Yet it wasn't an ending. It was a continuing spiral of growth, of love expanding outward, of family bonds strengthening with each passing day. The bench would remain here, telling their story to everyone who entered, reminding them that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness led to the most unexpected rewards. Outside, summer rain began to fall, pattering against the windows in a gentle rhythm. Inside, Joshua and Melissa gathered their children, preparing to head home to the life they had built together. A life none of them could have imagined on that cold Christmas Eve 3.5 years ago. Joshua paused in the doorway, looking back at the bench one last time. Frank had settled onto it, watching them go with the satisfied expression of someone who had witnessed something remarkable unfold under his roof. "See you at the barbecue next week," Joshua called to him. Frank nodded. "Wouldn't miss it. Someone's got to make sure those kids of yours don't put too much lighter fluid on the grill." Joshua laughed. We'll save you the good chair. As they stepped outside, Melissa took his hand, her wedding ring catching the light between raindrops. I've been thinking, she said casually. About what? About expanding our family woodworking business, maybe with some accounting expertise thrown in. Joshua raised an eyebrow. Are you saying what I think you're saying? She smiled, that same smile that had first caught his heart when she finally felt safe enough to show it. I'm saying I think it's time we both followed our dreams. Together. Life is too short not to do what you love with the people you love. Joshua pulled her close, kissing her softly as the rain fell around them. Mrs. Miller, I think that's the best idea I've heard in a long time. Behind them, the children splashed in puddles, their laughter rising above the sound of the rain. Ahead of them stretched years of possibilities, new projects, new challenges, new moments of joy and sorrow to be faced together. And in that moment, with his family surrounding him and the woman he loved in his arms, Joshua knew with absolute certainty what had stunned him that Christmas Eve night. Sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the darkest moments, and sometimes the family you never expected becomes the one you can't imagine living without. Let's go home, he said, gathering the children with a wave of his arm. Home, not just a house with walls and a roof, but the space they had created between their hearts. A space large enough for memories of the past and dreams of the future. A space built with kindness, strengthened with love, and filled with the laughter of children who had once huddled against the cold but would never be cold again.